I think I see Rami.
Hi, everyone.
Okay.
You're visiting colleges. Which colleges are you visiting, or do you not want to speak right now?
I'll stay off the record on that one.
Okay.
We can
CIA.
talk later, though, Peter.
Clearly CIA. No problem. My father's second wife worked for them also. She actually taught at Langley. Incidentally, that was a joke, everybody. Takako, thank you for joining us. Tyler, good to see you. Tyler and I met on primary day. May, thank you for joining us. Colin, nice to meet you. Oh, Barbara Chalky, I hope you're well. Ed, we've gone from the Niagara Falls to, I'm not sure, some special spatial environment. That is.
Pretty sure that's the tunnel of the Second Avenue subway, but I could be totally wrong.
Oh my goodness, I bet you're right.
Yeah, Ed said I was right.
Sarah, welcome.
Been doing this job way too long.
Yeah, really.
Oh, there's Sarah. Now that all the co-chairs are here, do you guys want to get started? Do you want to wait a couple of minutes for other people to sign in?
How does the sign in look, Will? How are you? We have people
All
still
good.
signing.
All good.
I believe that's Kelly joining us right now. So yeah, this would be a good time to get started. Do you want me to give the pre-meeting spiel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. Well, welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Community Board 8 virtual committee meeting. We are still operating virtually as this is the best we can do to produce a fair and open public meeting during this time with such short notice following the executive order. You'll notice that everyone is muted and unable to unmute themselves, except for the co-chairs of both of the two committees. Following the presentation and during the discussion, the co-chairs will call on members of the public who wish to speak. You can participate by going to the reactions icon at the bottom of your screen and pressing the raise hand button there. Don't hit the wave or the thumbs up, those will disappear. Only hit the raise hand icon once. If you hit it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you're calling in from the phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once the co-chairs call on you. The chat is available for technical support to help with Zoom software problems. It's not to ask questions of the co-chairs or the presenter. Those chats will never be seen by those individuals. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you'll need to go to the participants section where you can find the raise hand feature there. And finally, we encourage you to not raise your actual hand or wave at the screen because we may not be able to see you and we may miss you. So chat me, I'm here for your support if you need anything. Otherwise, I'll hand it back over to our co-chairs and they can get started.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So greetings all and welcome to the Social Justice and Youth and Education and Libraries Committee's meeting tonight. We called this meeting to learn what has occurred since the pandemic in New York City, focusing on our neighbors that live in CB8 regarding education, the education and educating of our youth. We also would like to assess as a community board and two committees combined to see if there are any issues as well as disparities with the hopes of combating the problems, if any. So all of our children and youth are receiving, we wanna make sure they're receiving the best possible education and receiving the best resources as well so they can thrive in their learning settings. There will also be a survey eventually dropped in the chat for families to fill out and submit if they have not done so already. we will be fully reviewing the surveys collectively together. And I am one of the co-chairs of the Social Justice Committee, and Sarah Chu is also a co-chair. And I'll kick it to Taina.
Thank you, Sandra, and thank you everyone for joining this evening. I would love to kick it off by welcoming Superintendent of District 2, which encompasses our district, Kelly McGuire, who we have the honor of joining us tonight. First of all, thank you so much, Kelly. I think I speak on behalf of all of us when I say we are just so deeply grateful to everyone at the Department of Education for all the incredible work that you've done on behalf of our cities and our district's children over the past incredibly hard year. I think it was hard enough for all of us. We just sort of can't imagine how hard it must have been for all of you. And I hope you're all preparing for a well-deserved summer break. So especially grateful that you joined us at this point in the year. And I would love to turn it over to you to share just sort of your high-level thoughts on some of the issues we discussed, just to everyone in preparation for tonight's meeting. I shared with Superintendent McGuire some of the concerns that we've had, that both committees have had about just sort of the disparities and inequities that we've seen as it relates to education and access for our children throughout the course of the pandemic, and what the city and our district in particular has in mind to help kids really overcome what has been an incredibly difficult year. So thank you, Superintendent McGuire, for your service, for joining us tonight, and for everything you do for our city's kids and for our district kids. And I'll turn it over to you to tell us a little bit about sort of the state of the district, if you will.
Thanks so much, everybody. And yeah, just thanks for having me. It's certainly been a difficult year for educators, but even more so for our families and for our kids. I know that I myself have school-age kids who have really been impacted by the inability to go to school every single day. It has been really, really hard for them. Even if I thought it was the right decision for them, and the right decision for the city to engage in blended learning. I know we were proceeding very cautiously there at the start of the year, and I think that was really, really smart. And I appreciate how our government has followed all of the science and proceeded cautiously and engaged families. But it's been really hard, and we continue to hear that. I've been running a reopening committee with a couple of members of our district team, a large group of parents from around the district, some of our teachers and principals. And our goal with that was kind of twofold. One, to hear from all that whole group about what it is that they thought would help to support a easy and smooth and supportive reopening in the fall, but also to make sure that we were lifting up voices of families and kids who were falling into different categories. Sometimes there's only one voice that comes to the table. For a long time, it felt, as superintendent, the only person or group of people I was hearing from were from the families that wanted to see a full reopening of school without any kind of precautions. And I'm sympathetic to that, but also sympathetic to families that chose to have their children learn remotely throughout the year. So it's that committee has been really, really important in lifting up and elevating those voices and making sure that we're getting a really diverse set of experiences when we're thinking about returning in the fall. And top of mind in regards to that return really is thinking about creating a welcoming and affirming environment for our students, but also for the teachers that work in our schools. We still continue to have kids who, into the last day of school, learned remotely. And part of the reason for families' decision to do that was not just because they were worried about COVID-19 or catching it or spreading it in their families, but really that they wanted to maintain the consistency and support that their children were getting when they were in the remote learning space. And so we want to really create that when kids are returning to school in September. We want kids to be able to come in, remake connections with families. I know for me, when I started visiting schools shortly after the 3 feet of social distancing rule went into place for elementary school age kids, that it felt strange. You walked into buildings that had been dead quiet for the longest time, and then all of a sudden there are 20, 25 kids in a classroom, and it felt weird. It was kind of like that first time when after you're vaccinated and somebody offers to shake your hand and you're like not exactly sure if it's the right thing to do, but that the science says you can shake somebody's hand now. And so that it just it feels strange, and we want to support people, whether they're little people or adults, kind of get through over that threshold. I'll say a couple of things about this past year and how it was experienced in our district. As you might know, I came to District 2, I returned to District 2 in February, early February. And so a lot of what it is that I've been learning about how it is that our district navigated the pandemic, a lot of systems and structures were in place by the time that I returned to District 2 in February. But what I can say is that people were working incredibly hard to put systems and structures in place to make sure that kids stayed connected to school. But even with an incredible amount of systems and structures, there were some small numbers of kids that were just very, very difficult to reach. For the kids that were able to stay connected day in and day out, week in and week out, the principals and teachers are reporting actually some pretty decent progress that kids have made over the course of the year. So, all of, we will have to find out, right, when we return to school in September, and really be able to evaluate how it is that students have grown academically over the past year. But there's a lot of reports from teachers and principals who say that kids who were able to log on consistently, show up to school consistently, that those students made close to the kind of growth academically that we might expect in a regular year. Now that doesn't go just like across the board, right? There are certainly some areas in which we see that students aren't accelerating their learning to quite the degree that they would in a normal year. But that consistency of connection is really the thing that has been so important. So if we talk a little bit about, who is it that did not stay connected, and what were the circumstances under which that occurred, we really are talking a lot about our students who are living in temporary housing, and students who might be living in some kind of, unstable or transitional housing, either moving from family to family or moving from home to home. And the connection was just, it was not always clear how it is that they were going to connect and whether they were going to be able to connect consistently. There were some amazing systems and structures that were put into place by schools. Schools, reported to me that the students might have started the year or started in the pandemic with a Department of Education issued iPad. But then, maybe something had happened with that iPad and they had a tech issue. So it was really when a school was functioning well as a team and had really wonderful outreach. Under those circumstances, schools were able to swap out iPads when they weren't working, or in other situations, they were able to swap an iPad for a laptop if a student was really finding that they were struggling on a laptop. So, the structures that just exist in schools and the teams really that are put in place to create and support that family outreach really help to make for a really difficult situation, just make it a little bit better, and ensure that help families to ensure that there was somebody at the school that they could connect with if they were having problems with their tech. Schools did some really unique and interesting things, I think, to try to engage families that maybe seemed like they were starting to fall off the radar a little bit. Again, in our district, we're not talking about huge numbers of kids, but schools would do kind of creative things like bring families in to come in and pick up additional supplies, or offer some type of, supply that was going to be used in a science experiment that the kids were really excited to do at home. And so families would, come to the school, pick up the supplies for remote learning, but it was also just kind of an opportunity to connect with those families. And, it goes to show that not everything can be accomplished over Zoom, right? That kind of like connection and development of a relationship really only exists when people see each other face to face. And so schools really did get creative with that kind of thing. And I just applaud the work that they did. And so consequently, we're talking about just a few students that were really, really struggling, and that we were really struggling, frankly, to connect with throughout the past year. And those were students who were living in very, very difficult circumstances. But like I said, as long as we were able to stay connected with kids, we saw their learning develop, and we saw them develop socially and emotionally as well. So that's kind of a little bit of what I can say about how it is that our district did over the past year.
That's helpful. Thank you so much, Superintendent McGuire. I'm going to turn it over to my fellow co-chairs to see if they have additional questions to ask you before we open it up to the public. I think you touched on a lot. I'd love to dig in a little deeper into sort of what that, a lot of what we talk about is that there is we recognize that we are a district that is more affluent and whiter than most districts throughout the city, but we also think it's incredibly important that we focus on the kids in our community that are being left behind, even if that is a small percentage of our district. And so I'll open it up to my fellow co-chairs, but at some point I'd like for you to address sort of, even if it's that small number, what quantifiably, like what are we talking about there? So.
I'll offer it. First of all, I think that was a great introduction. I appreciate that. And I don't know if I should speak for all of us, but I'm going to say, I think generally speaking, we really do applaud the efforts made under, as you point out, extraordinarily difficult and at least initially unforeseen circumstances. And I guess along with Taina's comment, I guess I'm wondering, do we have any way to even assess what we think the proportions are in different buckets of those who did pretty well, and more importantly, perhaps those who were struggling to make those connections, and whether any differences in terms of primary versus middle school versus high school. And I think it'd probably be even more difficult. So I'm not anticipating you can actually make distinctions between, different minority or ethnic groups and so on. But to the extent that we have a feel for the proportions in those different groups, can you give us a sense of that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we're working on as a district is that of trying to agree upon a set of assessment structures that we can use that will really help us to compare apples to apples, and will allow us to evaluate how students are doing in an environment that is supportive to them, so that assessments are not seen as just another test to take. We really want to dig in and personalize this experience of finding out how it is that kids are doing. But I think you're absolutely right that there's no real way to avoid the issue of saying that our students with disabilities, our English language learners, students who didn't feel connected to school particularly, students who maybe just to like build on that a little bit, students who didn't necessarily see school as their home. Those were, those are our kids that we are really, really concerned and worried about. I don't have a breakdown of, how it is that students perform differently according to racial background. I can say that we are really concerned about looking at the progress of our English language learners and students with disabilities. And one of the things that I'm pushing for in our district is this idea of doing some common assessments across our schools so that we can carefully look at how students were doing, not just by disability or English language learner status, but also how we were doing in regards to race, and thinking about how it is that we can support and improve instruction and connection for kids, especially our Black and Latinx kids who in this district have not made the kind of progress that our white and Asian kids have, that we can really work and build that connections with students and offer the kind of learning experience that are going to help them to grow as well. And that requires work that is far beyond just the work of responding to the pandemic, but that requires work on all of our behalf. And it's been a big focus of conversation that I've had with school leaders and teacher leaders since I've come into this position.
Yeah, I just offer one other question on that area, and it's an area where I'm more than hopelessly incapable of making a very, clear statement. But as some people know, I've actually gotten into over the last 15 years teaching at the college level. But I actually think that among other things, and I suspect you agree with this issue of universal literacy and reading second, third, fourth grade is particularly important. The last numbers I saw on a citywide basis, and I'm not sure they're necessarily the right number or entirely up to date, but it was, I think, about 2 years ago, said about 53% of our third graders were reading at grade level. And I guess I'm interested in your thoughts. A, is that even close to accurate? And B, how do we assess that? Is that, what's the good news in that? What's the challenge in that? And I suspect there's some of both.
Yeah, and I think also that there's some of, looking at our schools as well. The numbers of students who are proficient in our district is higher than that of the city average, like significantly higher than that of the city average, which is wonderful. But I think that we all know that if we find that there are more students who fall into one group, and that we have to pay extra special attention to make sure that we are targeting and supporting the kids who are not making that kind of growth and gains. And so the ULIT program that started a few years ago has been, every single educator that I encounter has been wonderfully complimentary of the work that they have done in our schools. I do think that there is, the reading wars and things like that have gone on for quite a long time. One, doesn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to looking at how it is that students are learning to read. That being said, I do think that a more comprehensive program of assessment in our district could be helpful in really being able to evaluate how it is that students are growing and improving, not just within schools, but across schools and across our district. And so that's a piece of this that I would like to see, done in all of our schools. And our teachers have made good progress with that.
Thank you.
Sure.
You have other people like to offer questions, thoughts, comments?
I would just like to say thank you for the information that you provided, and I'm going to yield myself with asking anything Because I think we agreed that we wanted to open it up to the public to speak and ask questions. And we got to be, a little gracious. So, yeah, but I'll yield if any other co-chair want to, chime in. They can.
I think we're good. If folks want to raise their virtual hand to be called for questions, that'd be great.
And just a reminder, you can go to the reactions icon at the bottom of your screen and click the raise hand button there, or it's *9 if you're on the phone.
I will say that there's some really interesting things that are starting to be planned out at the school level in regard to looking at not just literacy instruction, but instruction in all content areas when we look at the fall. There's been, and I'm sure that, as people who are here tonight, you're probably represent a group that's more in tune with how things are going education policy wise in the country than a lot of other groups. But, there has been this kind of, push to accelerate instruction. And some people have looked at that with the idea that it means getting through the content more quickly. But what's a really interesting thing that's happening in our schools is that principals and teacher leaders are actually looking to slow down and go deeper into content. And that's a really exciting thing. And not only do we see that as being a way of really enriching students' learning experience, but also of really deepening progress towards learning goals. So, all right, I'll shut up now.
I see that Deborah Freeman has her hands up. If we can unmute Deborah and she can ask her question, and then we'll do Rita Popper.
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay. Hi. So my name is Deborah Freeman. I'm also co-chair of the Education Working Group for Freedom's Democratic Club. And I guess I have two questions. One is, so it sounds like the proficiency rate in reading is much higher in our district. I'm curious to know what it is, what the percentage is. And then also you kind of mentioned the reading wars in determination of, curriculum, that being controversial over long term. I know Advocates for Children is one of the groups that has sort of recommended potentially a different curriculum. And I'm just curious to know whether there is any consideration of exploring a different curriculum or combining different curriculums.
Yeah. So our proficiency rating for kids in the 3rd grade is somewhere between 75 and 80%. So it is, kids do perform well overall. However, like I said before, we're still talking about, we have almost 30,000 kids. So we're talking about, leaving, hundreds of, I'm struggling with the math right now. We're talking about leaving thousands of kids behind if we just paid attention to, the 80% that we're performing on grade level. But, to your point, the curriculum has changed and shifted. And, what was, held up as, kind of the gold standard of reading curricula was found to, not have enough phonics-based work at the early grades. And so that's changed. And, thankfully, we have a lot of really smart teachers and a lot of really smart principals out there. And a lot of them have adjusted and tweaked their curricular programs in response to what they're seeing in regards to student needs. And so, that is, very much appreciated. So, before we used to just hear of, schools using a single program. Now we really are hearing of schools combining programs and ensuring that there is a phonics-based program that complements whatever standard curricula that they're using in the school.
Thank you.
Sure.
We can go to Rita now, please.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I am a former New York City school teacher. We were a receiving school at that time where I was in a model school, and then we received children from different communities, different ethnic backgrounds, and their ability was different, not for any other reason than they just weren't taught. And I pride myself in a relentless, I'm sure those kids still hate me, but a relentless amount of time, lunchtime, every time to read. Now, there was a movie not long ago with Moore, Michael Moore. And whose country will we invade next? And one of the segments of the movie was the French system of how they teach. And what it is that they start school at about 3:30. A school day goes until 4:30. And everybody learns to read. Not their parents are working. Our system, and let me tell you, I am now 82, and I started out as a teacher, that the system today is really not that much better. Let me give you an example. I'm a poll worker, and I worked at a school here on 3rd Avenue and 95th Street. And I saw the teachers coming down, and they looked like they were going to the beach. The teachers were wearing flip-flops, rubber flip-flops, sundresses. The kids are wearing shorts. And in a French school, that doesn't happen. And it doesn't matter how poor you are. It matters that there is a standard. And that's what we lack. And if we ask 1 million people, we'll get 2 million answers. And we're still not there yet. I'm talking 50 years ago. I'm talking almost 60 years ago. I still hear from my students from that very first class. They are in their 60s. And they tell me things, not because I went in, I had a job. My job was, I taught 2nd and 3rd grade. My job was to teach. It was a dictatorship. I was the dictator. I didn't really care, if they liked me or they didn't like me or their parents liked, but I didn't have one student who did not read on or above level. I was tired at the end of the day. There's something wrong with our system, and it starts with the curriculum, and it starts with being sloppy. People look sloppy. Sloppy people teach sloppy. I'm sorry. I know I'm old, and but no one has proven me wrong or right yet. And just my 2 cents, my heart breaks because we are one of the richest countries, and yet we're not doing anything. We're not that we're not doing anything. We haven't found the right way. We know how to get bikes from another country and bring it into this country, but we don't know how to do education. Japan has a 0 illiteracy rate, 0.
There's this a researcher, and it's it's pretty
Breaks
great
my
to hear
heart.
from.
Breaks my heart.
Yeah, it's pretty great to hear from from former students, and thinking of, well, I have students that were. I'm hope so that my students who I'm in touch with now will still be in touch with me when they're 60. I don't know, but there's this there's a researcher, education researcher named Lisa Delpit, and she has this term that she uses a lot in her writing. She's a professor, and she talks about being a warm demander. And so, if you were talking about demanding a lot from your students when you were a teacher, I also heard you say that you spent a lot of time with them on your lunch hour and at different points, helping to support their literacy and reading. And so being a warm demander, we have high expectations for kids. We want them to do their very best, but we're also gonna love them when they when they're messing up and not paying attention too. So I like that term a lot. Thanks, Rita.
I think we have Lakeisha Taylor next.
Hello. I have two boys, and I just wanted to express, basically my experience through this pandemic, trying to educate and fight for the education of my two boys were extremely difficult. I have a first grader going to second grade and a fourth grader going into fifth grade, and fighting for their needs during this pandemic and after was extremely hard. I had to pay for tutoring out of pocket for my fourth grader because we could not get into any kind of program in this neighborhood. I had to fight for my sons to get into a decent school in this neighborhood because all of our children in public housing here, we're zoned out of a decent school, and we're all housed in our community school. And I think it is horrible. While you may say that the reading level is great in this district, but it's all because anyone outside of public housing is all zoned into one school. When you live in public housing, you're not afforded the best. You have to fight for it. And as a single mother, it is extremely hard to have to fight for every single thing your children deserve. When the pandemic hit, I was shuffling my children from room to room in order to try and make sure the Wi-Fi was best, because I have two children on computers and I am going from phone to tablet myself to try and do work. It was ridiculous because we could not get into a program. And when we got into a program, they were sending me all the way to 112th Street and Lexington Avenue in order for my children to go into any kind of city.
You muted yourself, Lakeisha.
It was way out of my way. And it was just hard to get them any kind of help. And then when I put them in school, I felt that they were so far behind. After a year of learning at home and then having to go back into school 2 days one week, 3 days another, again, they were expected to just jump right back in. And it's just, I felt like, how are they ever going to adjust and learn when the DOE is not adjusting the curriculum for the year that was already lost, and for children who are always trying to catch up? So I feel that I'm always at a loss and I'm always struggling to catch up for my children, because that's how I feel as a parent. If your child is already struggling, and this was a horrible year, and my son now have to go into counseling because, again, it was a horrible year. And yes, many children had to do that, but as a single parent, I feel an extra heavy burden, and I do not feel, the support I feel is like I have to go out and find extra support. And as a community organizer, I am the person who's giving the support to my community. And now I have to find that extra support for my own children. That's
Yeah.
what I have to say. Thank
Yeah,
you.
no, thank you. And also just, I think that you are hitting the nail on the head in that in our district, in a district that has so many students who are performing well, ensuring that we are connecting with every single child is something that that's our life's work. And that's something that we need to constantly be striving to do better, both at the school-based level and at the district level. It is the conversation that I am having with our principals and teacher leaders. And, we can't hang our hat on the performance of just a few. We have to bring everybody with us. And as long as there is this disproportionality in our district, we are far from being done and far from being able to, call our work a success. So I do appreciate you, raising that though.
We can unmute Lori Boris.
Oh, can I say something first, please?
Sure, please, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I'm glad that a parent is on, and I don't know how many other parents are on, because this is the purpose of this joint meeting, to hear some of the good and the bad, the disparities, and just to look at it, because what we were hearing from the report, you didn't give us a full report, but what you were able to give us, it sounded like a thumbs up across the board, and it's good. And it's actually a conflict. She's actually on another meeting as well, that she's had to join this meeting remotely as well. So we couldn't get some of the residents from Holmes Towers, but I'm glad that Lakeisha Taylor did come on to speak, because her concerns are some of the children's and parents' concerns in public housing, Isaac houses and Holmes Towers. So I just wanted to address that. And this is the purpose of the meeting, to hear from all sides. And sorry about that, Lord.
That's fine. Thank you. Thank you for saying that, Sandra. And Mr. McGuire, thank you for attending and making yourself available to us. My two children both went through the public school system and successfully, are successful today. But I really did feel like it took a lot of navigating. But aside from that, as I said at my son's wedding, if you Google helicopter mom, or you'll come up with my picture. So the question I have for you is, I spoke to the daughter of a friend of mine who is an assistant principal at a charter school. And I asked her about the pandemic. I said, after, like, when the pandemic is, said and done, what was the greatest, challenge for this year? And her answer was, it was the inequity, that the children that it just exacerbated the inequities. So the people who were falling behind before the pandemic were falling worse behind, after the pandemic, and vice versa. So my question is, what is the plan? Or, that for you to, you can't change society, obviously, but what is the plan to try and engage the families to try and bring, the children who were not doing so well, to get their parents and their families, involved, so that they have, an example or a support to do better?
Yeah. Well, I can say a couple of things, or try to address that issue from a couple of different angles. One is that we have worked with our principals to engage in a series of kind of welcome home, homecoming activities for the fall, in which we are going to bring kids and families back into the building or outside, and to engage families in activities that really try to build and strengthen that connection. There are a few structures that we've all really gotten used to that I think will help to improve communication across the district. One of them is this, right? Is Zoom here. Schools are reporting that there are many more families that are connecting and engaging in things like PTA meetings or shares of student work and celebrations and things like that, because they are able to do it on a more flexible schedule or from a more flexible place. And some of the structures also that schools put into place to collect and distribute data, information about the school, those have become much more routine, and families have gotten a lot more used to schools communicating through electronic means, whether it's email or blogging or websites or different things like that. So there are some things like that are being put into place to help to connect with families a bit more. I will say, in order to connect more directly with students or to address the challenges that students are going to be coming into school with, is that principals are programming their schools differently for the fall than they have in years past. And what I mean by that is that in the earlier grades, principals are really bulking up on the number of specialist teachers that they have working in the earlier grades. I was just on with a principal before our call here, and she was talking with me. She works in Chinatown, and she was telling me how it is that she was programming more of her dually certified teachers who are skilled in more of the techniques and strategies for teaching English language learners. She's really bulking up on programming those teachers for the early grades, because so many of her students learned remotely throughout the year. And as I had said before, we didn't see the kind of progress out of English language learners or students with disabilities. And so making sure that in the early grades especially, we are catching kids and providing the kind of instructional support that they're going to need in order to make progress through the year. So there are things like that that are happening as well as a lot of rewriting of curricula, as I kind of touched on before, to try to make sure that the most important topics that kids are learning are not only being front loaded, but that we are going deeper into those topics and giving kids more opportunities to interact with the content and to develop proficiency.
And what about social workers? That's the other question I had. Are there going to be more social workers in the buildings? I don't know if there's a minimum that's been set, but would talk a little bit about social workers.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, in the past, the minimum was certain schools had a social worker, and those tended to be individuals who were overwhelmed by the need that was present in schools with high numbers of students who were in temporary housing, or high numbers of students who receive free or reduced lunch, or high numbers of students with disabilities. And so the allocation is increasing across schools that are high need, but also the allocation is increasing across the district. And we have 20 to 30 schools that never had social workers before that will have social workers in place in their buildings. And those individuals will be there to help to connect with families, support learning, really try to provide like a more comprehensive connection between the school and the home, as well as address mental health needs that kids are coming to school with at all grade levels. And so that's a really exciting thing. And our principals right now are working to do some of that hiring. It is new for many of our schools, but it is it is something that everybody is incredibly grateful for. And I think is going to really make a big impact on how our kids experience school.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
If we could go to Marco Tamayo next, and then we'll go to you, Rita, but I want to give Marco a chance since you spoke once.
Thank you, Taina. Lori, I think you did a beautiful question. Yeah, I think you went ahead of me. Beautiful, definitely. You're absolutely right. I agree with you. Mr. Maguire, I'm going to make some, put in context my question. And I don't think it's against you personally, because you are part of the system and you just, the outcome of our society is not your generation. There are many generations behind. So my point of view is next. Thinking about affordable housing. In affordable housing, I prefer to have two types of affordable housing. One for seniors, and the second is family with children. Those family with children, always there is a disadvantage in language. For instance, let me put an example. Right here is our fellow community member who described beautiful about his son, Ed Hassock. You see, Ed Hassock, when you hear to speak him, his vocabulary is very high. So remember, the first teacher are the parents. So if you have Ed Hassock and those children are going to compete with other children, especially with low-income families, where the F is in every sentence in the parents, or the parents, they have to work 2 or 3 jobs, or the parents, they don't pay much attention. And I think this is why the performance that you mentioned between 70 and 80% of reading, that's what it is. Because in reality, we don't pay attention to those people. And my goal is, if we provide affordable housing and we provide good education, but I think Peter Patch mentioned very well, learning to read by the 3rd grade. Why? Because this is the base of everything. Once the children are going behind, it always will be behind. So, and those children, and that's my concern, those children always will be demanding affordable housing. Remember, supply and demand is affordable housing. If the more increase the supply of the demand of affordable housing, the harder is to solve. So if those children are very well educated and they have remedial classes, and they have, like just mentioned, some of the parents mentioned that they need to have some remedial classes. If there is not this kind of programs, you always will kind of have these parents with these kind of problems. Probably because, you know, in the case of El Hassock, the vocabulary is so high that the children is already ahead of all of them. When for the teacher, when they come into class, it's very simple because they understand the message of the teacher. But for the other students, obviously they're gonna be always behind, boring, and probably said I'm in the wrong place. Maybe they're gonna say I'm stupid. I don't know what to say. The other guy, he's going ahead, and that is extremely important. Is to know to prepare a program to those children learn by the 3rd grade. If you don't succeed in that part, then you have more people that demand affordable housing because they will follow the parent or the parents, and rather to see outside of affordable housing, there is better lives. There are great future. We have great example. Maguire, the person that was running, this is a well-educated person. He can reach Obama. He can reach greatest levels of education. But education is the key, is the freedom. Without no education, I think the only heroes in this society are the teachers. And if we don't protect and conserve and care about the children, this country that do not have future. And the future of this country is the children. That's what we have to pay attention. And that in that direction, I think we have to create a good, strong plan, especially for minorities, because we have to help them. And that is the right time. If you don't help, then later we will have to be right to build schools. We have to build jails. We have to build prisons. So we have to reduce in that direction. This is the time to create a new country. This is the time to create something bigger. And the teachers are the key all of that. And I think Peter Patch is right. By the third grade, if they know how to read and they maintain a consistent remedial class for those children for 10 years, the only thing you're going to spend is $500,000 for maybe for 10 or 12 years. But if you don't do that, you have to produce affordable housing that the cost is between $700 and $1 million. So we have to reduce in that direction. That is my point of view in this point. And I think I disagree with you. And I had to mention that one of the fellow community members, I don't know what is her title, Elizabeth Rose. One day he came to the community board and he put it the Y's and the X's, and they said those that go in the higher to the right, they perform very well. Those that go into the lower level, they perform very poor. I'm sorry to hear that. How is possible in a richest country? Oh, do you have teachers that they pay less to perform poor in the schools? I think it's wrong. All the schools should have a minimum expectancy to perform. That means in this case that the teachers are responsible. So if their children do not perform properly, because probably you know what it is, it's probably the room of the classes are too big. Okay, so we need to build classes, we need to build schools, and there is chance to do it in our community rather to build prisons. I think it's cheaper to build classes. In that direction, I think probably I strongly respect your profession. I think you're the greatest heroes in this society. All teachers are heroes, but when they see the students perform properly, I think they deserve even more acknowledgement of what the job did. And I think pretty much, I think that this is my example, and the example I will continue. For instance, the children of Michelle Birnbaum, this logical that she has a beautiful expression of vocabulary and the way they're organized. For those children, that's what I said. The parents are the first teachers, and if the parents do not have this knowledge, we have to create remedial classes for those children, because we have to catch up with those children, because we need to create a great future for this country, and the only future is the children. That's why we have to be more careful. We have to put this strong attention, and this is why I'm tonight in this meeting. And thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Marco. We have Rita Popper with her hand up as well. And then I am really pleased to see, it seems like other members of the community, I'm hoping parents have joined. And so just want to open it up again, encourage you to raise your virtual hands. And, we'd love to hear your perspective. It does not have to be a question for Superintendent McGuire. It can be a comment or just an expression of your experience as a parent within the district. So just wanted to put that out there. It does not have to be a question for Superintendent McGuire. If you just have comments that you'd like to share with him, that's okay. Rita?
Mr. McGuire, if you get nothing out of taking back, or I shouldn't say that, if you get something that you want to take back, is let's take back the parent, Mrs. Taylor, who spoke about her two sons. And the key was that she said she lived in an area where the school wasn't good. And she wanted to go to an area where the school was good. And that brings me back to what I said before. Why is there a disparity in how we teach children in one area than in another? I'm going to use as an example, my grandparents came from Russia. How did they learn to speak English? Their children went to school and came home and taught them. But when their children went to school, they had a respect for the teacher, for the principal. You didn't come to school dressed to go to the beach. the problem is that poor people with a lower income don't deserve a disparity in the education that they're getting. They're getting that disparity because the parents who are working very hard don't have the time to go to the school and check up on their children until there is a full-blown problem. There shouldn't be that. And all I can tell you is that it's 60 years since that disparity existed. And I want you to know that I went to our principal, and what it was is that the book we were reading, Jim and Judy and Tags, the dog Tags, didn't really resonate with kids from a different area. So I offered to take those kids and teach them maybe from their songs from church how to read. And the principal looked at me, she said, you know, that's a very good idea, but I can't let you do that because if somebody comes by from Central Education, from the Board of Education, and they see that there is a segregated class, I said, well, it's only for English, it's only for reading. You know, we go to a doctor for an ear, nose, and throat. We go to a doctor for gastro. We go to a doctor for osteo. We need reading teachers. We need teachers who do nothing but read and accept nothing but the highest of standards, no matter what the school is. It's 60 years later, and that problem still exists today. So that means it hasn't been addressed. And it won't be addressed because maybe we should pay teachers more and get better people applying for teachers, people who really want to throw their heart and soul into. It's a hard job. It's one of the hardest jobs I ever had. You're on your feet, you're talking and everything. It's not going to, if it doesn't change, give me a social worker in a school, what's that going to do for the reading ability? I'm sorry, but the disparity exists and it shouldn't. Thank you.
Yeah, you're absolutely.
Go ahead, Kelly.
No, I was just, I was thinking about, I was never a teacher in New York City. I was a teacher in Oakland, California before I moved to New York. And when I was a teacher in Oakland, I remember sitting on the hiring committee with my principal. We were looking to hire a new math teacher. And like we struggled to get 3 people to apply for that position. And, when I came to New York, and was an assistant principal, I remember going through folders of applications, looking at resumes for one job. And I think that, one of the things that Rita talks about, and I think that Mr. Tamayo, Marco mentioned this as well, there's like this image of, kids trying to look over a fence. I'm sure you've seen it, and so there's 3 different kids of 3 different sizes, and the littlest kid needs 2 boxes to see over the fence, and the medium-sized kid needs 1, and the tallest kid doesn't need them at all. It's just a nice visual image of what it means really to give people what they need, even if it's not exactly the same thing. And I think that both of you make a nice point of highlighting that. And that's part of our work. The same equal is not everybody should get the exact same thing. We should offer what we can to eliminate disparity and disproportionate outcomes for kids. And if that means doing something different doing something differently to make sure that all kids are served, then that's what we need to do. So,
thank you.
I would like to, one second. Thank you, sorry. I would like to add also, please, peek in the chat, the survey is there for if you join later. And I'm not sure if the people that join later, if it'll still show up or not. But there is a survey in the chat for the parents and students to fill out. So we can, assess and see what are the needs if people don't want to speak publicly on here. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. If we could go to Deborah Freeman and then Billy Freeland.
Okay. One of the things that's been brought up in terms of academic supports to be provided to students who are having more difficulty is the idea of having either some kind of intensive tutoring and or with kids who are having reading issues, having small group learning experience, whether it be one-on-one or in small groups. And I know that's still, I think, being worked out in the city budget, but I'm just wondering whether whether teachers and principals are making plans to try to do that kind of thing if they see kids who need additional assistance.
Yeah, one of the things that happened with the passing of the federal stimulus bill is that New York City did get tons of COVID relief money and that schools were able to be fully funded. The unfortunate thing also is that some of our schools saw a loss of enrollment. But what is happening is that because of the federal dollars, there is the ability to hold on to teachers that may have had to have been accessed because of loss of enrollment. And what's happening is that schools are looking at how it is that they can repurpose teachers, especially teachers who are specialized in early literacy and provide intervention supports. I'm a little leery of work that feels too temporary if that's what some people are referencing when they think about tutoring. And I'm not saying that that's what you're referring to, but a trained teacher who is able to do that kind of reading intervention, I think is incredibly important. And it's not somebody who can, kind of fly in one moment or not be highly trained in order to do the good work. People need to be there. They need to be a part of the community, these staff members, and they need to be highly trained. And so we're looking at that in a number of our schools, which is really, really exciting.
That's great. Could I have one follow-up question?
Sure.
Okay, and it's not totally related, but I know that there's a lot of talk about wanting to make sure that the learning is stimulating and is not just kill and drill. And as a part of that, sort of bringing the arts in. And I know I heard the chancellor talk about the importance of having art and music and theater. And I think a lot of that during the pandemic has been missing. So I'm just curious to know to what extent that is going to be emphasized in the curriculum.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because a few schools there, and not, there's one of our schools that has the highest percentage of, or the highest number of students in temporary housing in our district. And that principal worked with her SLT and they refused to eliminate any arts or enrichment programs over the past year. And a lot of places did because it was very difficult to not just sustain those programs financially, but also they needed the teachers, right? Like, and didn't want to hire substitutes to do the work. And so an art teacher was repurposed as an English teacher. And, that wasn't the best thing for kids. And so I really applaud the schools that were able to do that, maintain the arts. And, as a principal myself, we saw the arts programs as absolutely essential. Arts and after school were absolutely essential to what I thought would make for a high performing, rich environment for all kids. Because I had plenty of students in my school who did not connect with their teachers in the way that they connected with either the art teacher or the after school staff, was incredibly important. And, I'm very proud to say that over the course of the 14 years that I was principal, we hired about a half a dozen of those after school staff on as full-time teachers and staff in our school. And you find the kinds of opportunities that are really going to help kids to connect, especially kids who come into school and they don't necessarily see that school is for them. And so whether it's through arts or after school or thinking about different groups or individuals that they can connect with, I think is incredibly important. And a lot of, for us, when we hired in a lot of our after school staff, we wanted to hire in for diversity because we were trying to increase the number of people of color who are teaching in our school. That was a wonderful way for us to be able to do that. That was a benefit to our students, all of our students, white, Black, Latino, Asian, all of our students benefited from that diversity. And I think that the same kind of thing goes a little bit for arts. You're trying to figure out what kind of way can we as a school create that connection that really tugs and targets a student at their heart and at their core. And arts is one of the ways that's done for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Billy and Rami, if you don't mind, we sort of collectively decided it was important for us to hear from members of the community. So if it's okay with you, if I go to Lakeisha first. Great, thank you. Lakeisha, please.
Oh, hi, I'm sorry to jump over other people.
No, please, we're happy to.
About you, family.
But again, I just, some things just spoke to me, and I wanted to speak again about my son's experience coming back into school after COVID. When the mayor decided to reopen school fully, my youngest son spoke of how loud it was when his class went from having a size of 10 to going back to a size of 20. He would come home and talk to me about how loud it was and how difficult, again, it was for him to readjust. And I think that is something, again, to talk about class sizes and what we're doing to children and the expectation of how we expect children to learn in these class sizes that are just way too big for them really to obtain knowledge. You understand? And when he did not do well, neither one of them really did well learning remotely, but some children really thrived. I have a friend who her son thrived learning at home. And now it's just really sad that that is not an option for children. That was not an option for me. I could not manage two children, two different levels, trying to do what I need to do, teaching them, getting health, medicals, whatever I needed to do, and for them to be successful. And then when it went from a small size to a large size, that wasn't great for them either. They missed out on having the arts because teachers did not return. Then they had art every semester. To me, that sounded like high school. I remember when I was in high school, I only had art in the first semester. Then I switched to gym, and then I switched to wood shop or whatever. And that's how it was for them. And my son told me he did not even get art at all this whole year. And I was like, but didn't you get it when you was at home? He's like, no, I had gym. And I was like, you're right. We were all in the living room doing gym together as a family during COVID. And he was like, I did not get art at all. So my son went through fourth grade the whole entire year and did not get art. And my son is a fabulous artist. And that is very sad to me, but again, I supplemented at home as I do because that's the kind of parent I am. But again, this, it's COVID, and it's technically 2 years of COVID, and it's the rest of our lives with COVID. And we will have to adjust because that's who we are as humans. But again, what are we doing to our children? This mayor is continuously making promises that he has not come through with. So what are we going to do? You understand? And like I said, my youngest, he talked about when the children came back, it was so loud. He was like, he wanted to cover his ears. It was just too loud and they had to make adjustments. So again, we already knew about years and years of the classrooms being overcrowded. So when the children went back, it was like, wow, it was great because the classroom sizes were small and children were thriving in a year in which they had already suffered and they had to play catch up because they were out of school for that whole year before. And now we're back and expecting them to just jump right in, but they weren't jumping in because they had to catch up from the year before. So now here we are, and then we had to still play catch up. So again, we are asking so much of children, and yet, like I will remind you, you're not adjusting the curriculum. You're not offering anything to parents. And again, I'm a single parent coming out of pocket to try and catch up, to make my children at the same level of parents who are, maybe 2-parent households, parents who are making $1 million, who can afford the other things, whose children are doing million of other things. But it's, again, what are we doing? What are we expecting? You understand? So that's my point. We have to adjust the curriculum to the expectations instead of asking the children to adjust to the curriculum. We really have to make it just so.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying about that. It's, we come to the children. We don't expect the children to come to us. We have to meet them where they're at. I also say that if you want to pick a issue that you'd get universal agreement on, and that it would be reduced class size, because I don't think you find one person who thinks that, classes should be 32, 33 kids. I think across the board, we would find support for smaller class sizes for sure.
If I could go to, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing this wrong, Tarisha Spencer Justice. I know that Superintendent McGuire, we have him until 8 p.m. So I just wanted to make sure we heard from members of the community first, and then I'll turn it over to Rami after. Tarisha?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes. Yes.
Oh. Yeah, well, I feel like Lakeisha, I know I have an 8-year-old that's going to 3rd grade, and I'm happy that she's going to 3rd grade, despite the fact that within the last going on 2 years now of COVID, when we first started, it was okay. She didn't mind not going to school, but then after being at home and having computer breakdown, not enough internet, and all the extra stuff. We didn't have internet before. I had to go get internet just for the laptop that they did give us from school that constantly keep breaking down for some reason every month or every other month. Yeah, I didn't know how to deal with it. I had to literally put her in therapy because she didn't want to go to school anymore. She was crying like it's the end of the world. She already didn't have like neighborhood friends and stuff like that. She has older brothers, but they're in like college and high school. I have one that's in 12th grade, hopefully graduate by next year. And he doesn't really like going to school online either, but there's no other way. And I actually prefer them staying home because of COVID, and I feel like they're much more safer at home. But I know they'd rather be out. She's in a charter school and he's in a public school. But it's been very difficult, and it's still difficult. I'm still waiting on a laptop to do summer schoolwork for almost a month, literally, because the last laptop broke down. They sent me a new one, and the only thing I was able to do was log in, but then it didn't have the programs on it. And I'm still waiting. So I already told them, I hope she's not gonna be penalized because it's not our fault that it doesn't have this stuff. And there's no way that we can go to get help or do the work that she needs to do, the everyday work or the summer homework. So I'm just, lost. There's no summer programs. My daughter don't even want to go outside anymore. She just want to stay in the house and play some silly game named Roblox. I'm sure some of you parents probably know about it. But yeah, that's all she's about now. But she talks to family members on the phone that's her age. And they're nowhere in, they're more like upstate or out of state. So there's not a lot of people that she could go play with. And I really don't want her to be playing with too much people anyway, too much kids. I don't mind, but it'd be great if they had some programs that she could do. She missed out on summer programs last year that I wanted her to like learn how to swim. The pools are not open. There's like nothing for her to do unless I take her out to the park or something. I do nurse's aid and I just stopped working because I'm almost due to give birth. So I don't know what's gonna happen. And I'm just like expecting anything, but I'm very happy that she passed her grade level. I actually wasn't sure, like I said, if she was gonna even pass. And I was like scared that she wouldn't pass because I was trying everything and she was like so depressed and down and, but thank goodness we got through it. And I'm hoping that she gets better and this school year would be a little bit better and we'll have more help from technology, from school, from people just trying to deal with the pandemic and not just, oh, this is the school rule and this is what we can do and this is what we cannot do. Not using your common sense and be like, oh, with the pandemic, we need to change some things, or try to adjust with the parent, help the parent and the kid, especially the kid out that needs more help in whatever way that they need help, tutoring, online, one-on-one, community-based, not like distance, because I really don't want to go anywhere far. I want to go around the corner. So yeah, basically, my concerns are basically similar to Lakeisha's and the other parent that spoke earlier.
Thank you so much. Superintendent McGuire, I don't know if you wanted to address that. I think I will say, as one of the co-chairs of the committee, I think, we have monthly meetings and this is just sort of a microcosm of what we see, right, month to month, is that there's just like this wide range of experiences in our district. Yep. With, I think by and large, an overwhelming amount of people who, think things are going well. That being said, we have to recognize that this is a self-selecting group of people that has the time and energy and resources and Wi-Fi connection to actually join us during these meetings, right? So it's really important for us when we hear from parents like this in the community that have concerns. So I'll let you address, some of what you heard, but I'd also, just love to follow up separately with you, just to get your guidance on how we can help support families in our district who are just having challenges, like, right, as what may seem as simple, but is incredibly, restrictive, like it taking a month to fix a laptop. So those sorts of things.
Yeah, that's super unfortunate. And I did put my email in the chat. I know it goes directly to Will, but if you can, like, post it for other people, you could reach out to me directly. I know Tarisha had shared that her child went to a charter school, but the Department of Education iPads that, you probably hear the word iPad and you have like mixed feelings. One, it's an amazing thing. And two, you hear the frustrations that so many families experienced over the pandemic with those. But those iPads were available and continue to be available for all including those who attend public charter schools as well. So that's one thing. And I also understand too, for a variety of reasons, why families want to keep their kids close. It remains a not just because of the pandemic, but because of all kinds of things. Because of racism, because of discrimination that our families are experiencing, because of fear that families have with their kids out in the street, that they want to keep their kids close to home. So, but I will say that there is this enormous summer program that the city is sponsoring, which again, like the iPads, probably brings both smiles and frustrations because some families have had a difficult time signing up for summarizing. But if anybody knows of anyone who needs support with that application, I can help to make that happen with getting families connected to a summarizing site. We have had some sites filled up in our district, but there are other sites that are available. So reach out if that's something that I can be of help with. And I am sorry, I do have just about like 5 minutes left. I have an appointment for my daughter that I need to go to, but I want to stay, and I definitely also want to come back.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'll just turn it over to Rami Siegel, my fellow co-chair, who is a high school student in the district, and so he wants to say hi.
Yeah, hi. I'm Rami. I go to the Clinton School, which like 4 years ago, it was a District 2 when I applied there. So technically, I'm still in the district. I'm a grad of PS 290, so definitely in the district there. And if you're in Union Square ever, just stop by, say hi. I'm not in the summer, but during school, I'm typically there. So good to meet you.
Yeah, good to meet you too. Are you going to be a senior next year, or?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm a rising senior. So almost done.
Principal 11 was one of my teachers, so let me know if he doesn't.
Yes, he actually he mentioned you in a meeting the other day, and it sounds like you're being an amazing leader, and we from at least on behalf of the students at my school, I'd like to thank you for your leadership during the pandemic.
Thanks, Rami. I will.
We only have. Go ahead.
Nope. I'll come by Clinton sometime.
All right, we'll hold you to that. This is being recorded.
Yeah.
I'll turn it over to Billy. Billy, if you could just wrap it up in a few minutes with anything you want to share with the superintendent before he goes.
Yeah, I'll try to be very brief. I know time's limited. Thank you, Superintendent McGuire, for joining us. I hope we will see you again. And I look forward in the future hearing about your experience in District 15 with the diversity plan there, which got a lot of praise. And I think we could learn a lot from that. And at some point in the future, I'd also love to know some of your views or your guidance for us on how to look at inequities like PTA funding and the inequities in PTA funding. But I want to get to a very specific question. We've talked a lot about class size. There's one proposal I've heard to bring a lot of equity to our schools, and that's to try to have 2 teachers in every elementary school classroom. Right now, some schools are able to raise the PTA funds to get such a second teacher in the classroom. Is there a trade-off that, as we think about this as a board going forward, that we should think about between 2 teachers in every classroom versus the broader goal of lowering class size by hiring more teachers? And if so, can you walk us through how you think we should start to think about this if we hopefully take this on in the months ahead?
Wow, that's a great question and a tough trade-off. And one of the things that I do think is really great is this idea of having 2 teachers in every classroom. I love that model. It's a model that we had across the school that I was principal of. And teachers they're not automatically good at it. You don't just come out of teacher school and you all of a sudden are great at co-teaching a class, but people can become really magnificent at it and really do wonderful things for kids. And I think there's a difference between having 2 teachers and having a teaching assistant, which I know that some of our PTAs do fund teaching assistants in some schools. But having 2 certified teachers is a really big deal. Honestly, I don't know that I could throw my chips in one decision or another. I will say that there are some research out there about teacher effectiveness, and that an ineffective teacher, a teacher who's not meeting the needs of his or her students, may be able to make improvements for students, but only if the class size is so incredibly small that you basically kind of eliminate the factor of effectiveness. So whereas an effective teacher can do a magnificent job of teaching a really large class. So I don't have the like data right in front of me, but I think that, what I have seen to be proven, and I think that is that of having two teachers in a class of 30 students who are supported to really learn how to use both of those adults effectively, but also have the space to be able to do that effectively as well. If you're cramming 30 kids and two teachers into a small room and you don't have anywhere to go to do a small pullout of any kind of kids, whether they're kids who are accelerating and going to turn into like the expert group for another group, or kids who are studying one topic who can then turn and teach it to another group of kids. If you don't have anywhere for kids to kind of do that flexible grouping, it makes it hard when you even if you do have two teachers. But I've seen some pretty magnificent things come out of the two teacher model, where kids who just like light up with their ability to become an expert. And they're not always the students who are the most proficient in the class who become the experts, but empowering kids to be able to do that and teach their peers is a pretty amazing thing to watch. So I don't know if that was a non-answer, but I can only speak from my experience. So.
Well, thank you, Superintendent. We want to be respectful of your time. I know it's a minute past when you have to go. We can't thank you enough. We hope you will come back. I hope you enjoy your summer. We're really grateful, and we want to have this be a continuing conversation. Thank you for offering up your email. This is recorded, so there were about 30 folks on this, but plenty of folks in the district watch after. So again, thank you so much for joining us. The meeting will continue, but just wanted to
thank you.
Dismiss you.
Thank you so much, and have a good evening, everybody. And
thank you for joining. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care.
I see Mrs. Brown has her hand up, so if we could unmute Mrs. Brown.
Yes, I had a question for the superintendent, but
sorry.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
We can, Mrs. Brown, if you, first of all, he put his email there. I'm also going to follow up with him. So you can either send it to me or send it directly to him. I think he definitely, made it clear that he wanted to answer as many questions as possible. So feel free to send it to me or to him directly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, I don't know if you wanted to share anything, or Sandrea, or if anyone wanted to jump in. Of course, obviously this conversation can and should continue. The superintendent had to go, but certainly we want to hear from folks if there are additional thoughts. And I know that we have a member of, and thank you for patiently waiting this long, Courtney. We have someone from Assembly Member Seawright's office. So I'm actually gonna, since there are no hands up, turn it over to you. I hope this has been helpful to hear from the superintendent and to hear from some of the parents in the community, but I'll turn it over to you to share some thoughts.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Assembly Member Seawright, I want to thank the co-chairs of the Social Justice Committee, Sarah Chu and Sandrea Coleman, and co-chairs of the Youth Education and Libraries Committee, Taina Barrero, Peter Patch, and Rami for this important presentation. And thank you to Superintendent Kelly McGuire. Assembly member would like to wish congratulations to the classes of 2021. She's been addressing the graduates throughout the district and wants to wish everyone a safe and enjoyable summer, as June 25th was marking the last official school day of the year. We have a few updates. New York City is currently under a heat advisory, so those who don't have access to air conditioning, they can contact our office to find a local cooling center on the Upper East Side or Roosevelt Island. The free summer meals program begins today across New York City, so you can text NYC Food to 877-877 or call 311 to find a community meal center. On June 23rd, New York City announced that all New Yorkers age 12 and older are eligible for in-home vaccinations effective immediately. To request an in-home vaccination, you can go to nyc.gov/home vaccine or call 877-VAX4NYC. New Yorkers aged 12 to 17 who receive their COVID-19 vaccine can have their names entered into a random drawing for a full scholarship to SUNY or CUNY. And the deadline to enter that drawing is tonight before midnight. And lastly, we'd like to provide some information for the Department of Youth and Community Development, who has a portal called Community Connect, which is a resource and referral service for communities and families in New York City to increase awareness of opportunities and services available to New Yorkers, including youth employment and internship programs. And that phone number is 800-246-4646. You can receive assistance in over 180 languages. And finally, in honor of Pride Month, we'd like to share a resource guide named To the End of the Rainbow and Back, which is designed by the Hetrick Martin Institute. And it's a resource guide for supporting LGBTQ+ youth in human and social services. And if I'm able to, I'd like to just link some of these things in the chat for everyone. And I think that is it.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
I just wanted to pipe in really briefly. I wanted to validate what Lakeisha said about small class sizes. I was hoping that we had so many great questions and comments from the community. I didn't want to interrupt while the principal was here. I wanted to give props to PS 158, where my daughter goes, because they did an amazing job during COVID. Toward the end, and so when she first went back to school and the class sizes were small, there was just such a marked difference between the attention that she was able to get and how much she was able to learn compared to when the class size increased when the 3-foot rule was ended. And so I do hope that class sizes are something that we can continue to talk about. And then to touch on the PTA fundraising, right before the end of school, when we had that prior heat wave, the parents at 158 were on a Facebook group, and we answered a call from the school to buy fans for the school because not all the air conditioning was working, and we needed to make sure that the teachers and students were able to be able to be in that building in a healthy way. And one of the mothers in the group raised the question of, I can buy fans, but I don't know if other schools can mobilize as quickly as we have been able to. So is there some way for us to, and maybe this is something that we can think about in the future, like she raised the idea of, for every fan that we buy, that we can put money into a fan for another school. And so maybe that's part of the concept that we can propose for PTA funding, because parents do want to see the money that they donate to a school being used to support their kids. But at the same time, I think that parents might be open to having maybe a percentage of PTA funding in being put into a pool. The DOE proposed that in the past, except they proposed it for all PTA fundraising. And that didn't go well. But maybe what would be a way to bridge kind of the need in our schools, as well as the generosity of our parents who are able to donate, that there could be more discussion about some sort of system where parents still see that their donations go impact their schools, but have the opportunity to support other schools too.
Others? I just want to remind everyone of the survey that is in the chat that we will be including in newsletters. I think I speak on behalf of all of us when I say, well, I see Billy and Lakeisha have their hands up. Let's go to Billy first, or Lakeisha first.
Sorry. Oh, wait, let me.
No,
sorry, Billy.
No need to apologize. Please, we want to hear from you.
It seems like I keep taking Billy's spot, though.
Great. We love it.
It's just that I wanted to touch on diversity in when you're hiring in schools. When my son first went to 151, he did not see an educator of color in the entire school. I'm sorry, let me correct that statement. There were no teachers of color. There were only assistants and people working in the cafeteria of color in that entire school. And I was told that there was one African-American teacher, female, in 5th grade. And they thought that that was acceptable. And when I questioned them about the curriculum and why there was nothing of any ethnicity around, that I was told, well, they have it when Black History Month comes around. And I was like, but why is that? That's not acceptable for all of the children that you teach. And I got so much pushback. And when I was questioning them about how they were teaching my child, I was told, well, you don't have a say. And I had point by point why this was not true. And it ended up with me pulling my son out of that school because they refused to change anything, to do anything. And there was no representation for my son to look at and say, I see myself. I see myself in an adult. I see myself in someone that I want to be. I see myself in something other than a textbook for more than 30 days, and not even 30 days, 28 days out of the month. And not even that, because they're not in school 28 days in February. You understand? So this is one school, and this is a community school that, because I live in public housing, all of us are deemed to go to automatically because the district draws the line around where we live, and we don't have a choice unless we fight. So for 1 year, my child went to charter school, and then my youngest son came, it was time for him to go to kindergarten. And when I went to his IEP meeting, because he has an IEP, I blatantly told them, you will not teach my child in this school. I would not allow you to teach a dog in the school because of the way you taught my son and the other children. And they looked at me and said, why would you say that? I said, because of how you teach these children, because of how I've seen all of the other children of color walk around this school. Those are the only children I ever see being sent to the principal's office. And that is my personal opinion. That is the opinion of other children, other parents that I see who live in my building. But luckily I was able to fight, and my children go now to PS 527. And in that school, I literally cried because I saw so many different people of color, I saw men, I saw women, I saw people of color in every level, kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, and it wasn't limited to 5th grade, the oldest, where they feel that this is where you're the strongest and you need this person of color because Black women are the strongest and they can teach you then. Why is that? Because again, you are dealing with stereotypes. And that is not what I felt my child needed to see and hear and learn from. And this is the problem with the educational system. And these are the stereotypes in which that we need to break. This is the problem with the fact that we live in public housing and these lines are drawn, and we are destined to continue to just fall into this one school. And this is what the problem that we have. And this is the same problem that I am going to have to face next year when my child goes into 5th grade and he is only allowed to go into Wagner Junior High School, where that's the majority of where they send all of our children when they graduate from elementary school.
Thank you for sharing. I see Billy still has his hand up.
Yeah. First, thank you, Lakeisha, for sharing that. I think that's just an incredibly important point, and hopefully that's something we'll keep discussing as a community board going forward, and what we can do a little bit differently on it. All I was going to say was, we've had a lot of good discussion about the change we'd like to see, and I'm wondering whether we as a committee, as a joint committee, want to take action. I'm not necessarily saying we do it today, but because we only have one full board meeting left before we break for the summer. But the city council is in 2 days supposed to finalize a budget. Last I saw, that budget may or may not include $250 million for reducing class size. But even if it does include that money, it's probably not going to be nearly enough. And then there's the other issues we talked about around equity, around funding for more teachers, two teachers in the classroom model. So I'm wondering whether, maybe this is a question for the co-chairs, whether we want to pass any resolutions or take action in some way to elevate this to the full board, or have another meeting on it and then maybe work on some resolutions. I'm just curious what you all think we can do to turn this into some action.
I would not be opposed to that. I'd love to hear what Peter, Rami, and others have to say, in particular with the 2-teacher model that we heard about from the superintendent. So I think that would be good. I don't know if the other point you were making was related specifically to a resolution that would make reference to the city council funding that is sort of up for, that we'll sort of know about shortly. Again, not opposed to that. And I think, it certainly can't hurt, and it could be nice to do something before September, right? Because then that would be the next point when we would do something.
I, for one, would be certainly happy to support the motion for additional funding. Honestly, if I thought the 2-teacher model was clearly beneficial, I could support that also. But I frankly, I was listening to him. I thought he was being very candid, which I appreciated, very sort of open about his own point of view. I'm not clear whether we can say clearly that that's sort of a model that we should be proposing. So I'm not opposed to it, but I'm not clear I'm in a position to support it without more information.
Wendy, sorry, I know you had your hand up earlier and then you put it down, but if you want to contribute anything, please.
And Wendy has a slow computer, so it just takes her a second to unmute.
Okay, sure, no problem.
There you go, Wendy, you're unmuted.
Hi there. Thanks so much. I have the most ancient computer and it's taking minutes to respond because it's very cranky and heat, and I actually have an ice pack on it. It was a great discussion tonight. I hope there's another joint session again. I think that there were a number of questions that I had before my computer died and I had to rejoin the meeting, and then it was time for the superintendent to leave. One is just the metrics of what are we looking at? How are we measuring performance? Is that really an accurate way of measuring against pre-COVID standards? And how are we adjusting those metrics now? And how are we measuring teachers? It's really easy to put all the blame on students, and having worked in helping parents for almost two decades to secure the educational rights of children with disabilities. I know that the blame even in plans and in IEPs were often placed on the children rather than kind of a sharing of responsibility and achievement. One thing that I think is a useful construct, I wanted to ask the superintendent about any changes he might have in teaching methods, whether it's just transitional, which I think he's resisting a little bit, or permanently, is to teach regular ed mainstream teachers to instruct them in some techniques that are useful for special ed teachers, because just the situations that the teacher reported in terms of her son having a sensory issue with the sound, there are other kids who have tremendous issues with just the physical presence of people sort of touching up against them, or whether it's a sound or a smell or other sensory issues. These are things that can easily be addressed and can be used with all students to great benefit, and to have a robust inclusion model. So I would love it if there was another meeting. Billy, it's a wonderful point to try to incorporate this into a budget. That would have been awesome. I don't know that can be done. Reducing class size is always a wonderful, wonderful goal. It really matters. I just heard a great lecture today that talked in different terms that I'm used to using, between the sort of tight, intensive behavioral model of instruction and the looser, incidental model of instruction. And I will just say, on a very personal note, I had a child who was very ill as a very young child and needed to not be in a classroom and to be very isolated. And I found that there were many methods that I could use to instruct at home. So I know about those particular stresses and burdens and joys as well. But one thing that I couldn't do was do all of the incidental learning and all of the socialization. And so for my perspective, then when my kids rejoined the human race in the classroom, that was a very important factor. So I think that teaching teachers these other methods that will not have them sitting on the rug. I used to observe and go and look in the Rami, you went to 290, and so did my daughter. And I used to, peek in the classroom window, and I would see that the kids were having rug time. We used to have desks, and it gave you some sort of postural support. And they sat on the floor for 45 minutes doing a successful reading lesson. And then because nobody was peeping or making too much trouble, the teacher went right into 45 minutes of math instruction on the same rug, which is sort of a disaster. So maybe there are other models of teaching that we could quickly implement that might be useful to look at, maybe useful to fund a study on. Maybe that's not for us to do, but there needs to be further discussion, but also data. We don't have any data. We have a lot of interesting anecdotal points, including mine, and everybody else's. I'm not saying that mine are interesting, but just that they're anecdotal. And we really need some hard data to go forward on, and to hopefully ask the superintendent to come back. And thanks for listening.
I'm gonna jump in if that's okay with everyone. Thank you. I know the superintendent spoke about diversity in hiring. So I'm gonna personally email him myself as an activist and an organizer, because when we hear diversity, it's my hopes that it's not tokenism, right? Because they can hire people of color, but are they getting the best teachers? So that's something I would like to look into, and ask and advocate for, when they are dealing with diversity. Go with, the top, just not for, if it's tokenism, like I said, we could wind up with any teacher of color that might not be as grand as the next teacher of color. So I just wanted to bring that up because we always hear about diversity and we don't really know what's behind it. And I'm curious myself.
Fair. Deborah has her hand up.
Going to the class size reduction and the budget. I know there's just a couple of days left of the budget. There was a big press conference today, the Class Size Matters and AKU, many other educational organizations were at. The City Council is supporting $250 million towards class size reduction. So, I think for anyone who wants to take action to support it, signing the petition that Class Size Matters has, making calls to legislators would probably be the most effective thing at this point, in my point of view.
Thank you. So I think, Billy, unless you wanted to propose a resolution, I think they're sort of mixed. I think my personal opinion is, and I think I agree with Peter, is that we could wait have a little bit more information, before passing a resolution without having all the information. I think that happened a little bit at our last board meeting where we passed a resolution and there were just a gazillion questions at the full board level. So I would like to avoid that happening again. But if you wanted to propose a resolution, I'm open to that as well.
I don't feel a need to put a resolution on the floor. Anything we pass is not going to have the full weight of the full board anyway in advance of the budget being finalized. So I'm not sure it's necessary. I mean, I'm kind of, agnostic on it.
Thank you.
We're also looking for feedback on the surveys, so that would actually help.
That's a good. The survey
for it, right?
Excellent point. So that maybe what we introduce in the fall is truly reflective of the feedback that we get from the community.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'd like to keep these both these issues active. I mean, anything we can learn about sort of teaching models, teachers in the classroom, definitely the treatment of teachers and the selection of teachers of color, and any issue around funding to provide additional resources, to our schools. I think it's going to be a central issue, today, tomorrow, and I think we should continue to focus on it.
And Peter, if I may jump in, the fall is also when we do our district needs statement. And this may be a great thing to add to our district needs statement if this is something the committee supports.
Good point.
Thank you. Other comments? Other points people like to make?
Motion to it. Oh, no, we got to do other stuff. Sorry. Right? We got to go into the old.
If there's older new business.
I was about the motion.
I like where your head's at though, Sandrea. Looks like Russell is seconding that.
Okay.
Well, thank you everyone for joining. I agree. I think there's a natural synergy between these two committees that we should probably leverage more often. And so, I may be speaking out of turn on behalf of my co-chairs, Peter and Rami, but I think that there, could be a benefit to us, doing this more often throughout the year. And again, encourage everyone to fill out the survey, share it with parents that in the community to fill it out. This is pretty specific to getting input from parents and students in the community. No offense to non-parents like myself. And I think unless any of my fellow co-chairs have anything to add, we can be done for the evening.
Anything, Sarah?
Nope, I'm all set. Thank you.
All right. Well, we'll plan accordingly next time and define things more concretely, so it'll be flowing much better. So that's it. Good night.
Thank you.